Welcome to the Edgevana Podcast, where we illuminate subjects in the IT infrastructure space. Get ready to hear some amazing insights from outstanding individuals that will change the way you think about IT. And now, here's your host, Mark Thiele.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Edgevana Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Thiele, and joining me today is longtime industry speaker and thought leader and practitioner, and a person who I really appreciate being able to call friend, Andi Mann, CTO for Kumu. He's globally sought after as a speaker. He's an amazing contributor, and on topics from work from home and work remote to DevOps and other IT topics in general, like cloud and even edge computing. The guy is a fount of knowledge and always willing to help. Andi, really excited about having you on the podcast.
Mark, it is so amazing to be here. I'm surprised we haven't been on this before now, but I'm super stoked to be with you today.
Same here. You know, I as soon as I looked at your name and thought, why don't I have him on the podcast? What you just said was the first thing I thought to myself is, you know, WTF, why is this taking so long, right? So I'm really happy to be here. So Andi, you know, this is a relatively new gig you're in. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started at Kumu as the CTO here back in July this year. So not that long, just really getting my feet under me now. Prior to that, of course, I was at Splunk for about 6 years in various roles, mainly as their CTO for DevOps, as Chief Technology Advocate was my official title. Did a bunch of stuff there, you know, but before that with large enterprise software companies. You mentioned DevOps, and you know, I got to learn about DevOps starting when I coming out of the cloud industry, when I was an analyst doing a lot of work on cloud computing. Coming out of virtualization and automation background myself personally. And moving into DevOps was just very logical coming out of that cloud conversation. You know, cloud accelerated everything. We needed to be agile. We needed to do DevOps to get that level of speed and agility. Then that really led me into collaboration and what does it mean to work as a team, and what does it mean to work as a collaborative team, especially with the large enterprises that I was working with at that time. How do I help them do the infrastructure and development and programming and get that all working together across organizational boundaries, across geographical boundaries? And, you know, that ended up making me think about, well, what does it mean to collaborate, especially in a post-pandemic kind of world, which hopefully will be there in a moment. What does it mean to collaborate and engage with teams? And I've had a remote team for myself for maybe 20 odd years. I've worked remotely for over 20 years. So this idea of what is collaboration in a fundamentally changing environment where work in the office is a totally different thing, and it may not even exist, and then work from home and work remote. And my studies with things like the state of DevOps reports, looking at those boundary conditions, and when we put people in different locations and especially in different time zones, we're creating boundary conditions. So I was fascinated to see how video and enterprise video as a service could play into that collaboration and engagement. So I joined Kumu, and that's what we're doing, is delivering video as a service to enterprise businesses so they can increase that level of engagement and collaboration, both internally, but also with their partners and customers.
Well, that's outstanding. And I mean, it is a huge topic area, and one that some of us have been talking about since the very early days of the pandemic, right? I think many of us recognized as early as March or April of last year that this pandemic would likely have long-reaching or far-reaching and long-term impacts on how people worked. And so I'm excited to talk about this more because, you know, kind of as an opening, kind of an all-encompassing thing is that I think one of the things that many of us still get wrong about this is making the assumption that it'll be one way or the other, right? So either we'll all go back to the office or we'll all still stay home. And as much as the word hybrid gets overused a lot in IT these days, hybrid cloud, hybrid work, hybrid ops, whatever. I think that it's fairly apt, right? Is that we have to figure out how to allow people without blanket policies of, oh, you can only work from home, or you can only work in the office, or you have to come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or, that kind of thing. But to be able to match, right? If somebody does work on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the office, what about if most of their team is there all week, or if most of their team is actually only remote? What's the point of them even coming into the office, right? So there are a lot of questions about that I don't think we've solved for yet. And tools and leadership style and policies in general, not blanket policies. I've never been a fan. And I think now is more important than ever to avoid blanket policies. But I think it's really critical for companies to have a position and to be able to articulate that. And it's a differentiator for being able to hire people is bottom line.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
So Andy, I want to just jump right in. Andy, I've already done way too much talking. I want to let you do as much of the talking as possible. And as you said at the beginning, before we started recording, it's too bad we can't do it over a bottle of wine at a dinner table somewhere. But this is the next best thing for the moment. Hopefully we can remedy that sometime soon. So one of the things that we talked about as far as potential discussion topics was a combination of work from home, work from anywhere, and you even added WFWW. And that's one that I'm guessing at. I didn't bother to look it up first. I wanted you to explain and show everybody that I recognize that I'm not all-knowing most of the time. Definitely most of the time, not all-knowing. So talk to us a little bit about WFWW.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? I've worked remotely for a long time, and I love what you're talking about, this idea of mandatory policies. I think it was Microsoft or Accenture recently did a research and found that over 50% of staff wanted to work from home, but over 50% of staff also wanted to come back to the office, right? It's this weird thing. And so work from home has been pretty standard for a lot of people for a long time. I've worked from home for 25 odd years, right? I've got my setup here, and I got a camera, I got a microphone, I got some lights even, I've got multiple monitors, and I'm sorted. But when I travel, I work from a plane, I actually work from a hotel. So I'm actually used to working from wherever for quite a while. So that's the first W, work from wherever. We actually had one of our senior leadership team worked for 2 weeks from Belize recently. Good, decent time zone for us. Needed to get a mental health break, but couldn't take the time off. So, took the family down to Belize, continued to work because it's fully connected, right? I mean, we can do, here we are. I mean, you look like you're in your home. I'm in my home. It's my home office. Fully connected. There's no reason why we need to not be working just because we're in a different state. Right. But the other W is whenever. Right? Nice. When you start to think about wherever, you have to think about whenever.
Right.
Even if it's just across one time zone, right? I'm in Colorado. I'm in the forgotten time zone, mountain time. There's Eastern time, Central time, and Pacific time, right? Yep. No, there's also mountain time. USA has I think last time I looked, 13 different time zones. Let's not talk about Indiana daylight saving time. But already in the US, I've got 5 hours. If I include Hawaii, Alaska, I've got longer, 7 hours of my country. Yep. So now I'm working with people across those boundaries. Yep. But I've got a team in the UK. I've got a team in India. I've got a team in Eastern Europe. Wherever means accommodating all of this, which means accommodating whenever. So WFWW is work from wherever, whenever. And there's lots of tools and processes we have to enable this.
Yeah. And I like it, and it's early on in the pandemic, and I don't know if I was the first one to come up with it, but it was pretty early. It might've been late March or early April. I was talking with a couple of different people. I think Tim Crawford was on. I don't remember whether you were there or not, but we were talking. In fact, it might even been one of Rob Hirschfeld's Cloud 2030 discussions, where I suggested the idea of WFA, right? And I like the WFWW because it provides a little bit more of the description. My point with work from anywhere, for many people, required a little bit of context, right? And so, well, why is that different from work remote or work from home? I said, well, you could argue that it's not, except for one vital thing, and that's that. As you said, working from home for 25 years, and I've been working mostly from home for the past 15 years, maybe not quite 15, 12. And the difference between working from home and working from anywhere, or WFWW, is that when you work remote, you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to take care of the kids today at home, but if something really goes wrong, I can come into the office. Right? I'm 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
But what happens when there is no office? Right? Then, or there's no room for you to come into an office, even if there is one. Yeah. Then this whole notion of working remotely or working from home takes on that perspective of WFWW, where you have to be able to support the time zones. You have to be able to support the fact that they may be on a boat, they may be in a plane, they may be in a cabana on the beach somewhere, but it shouldn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And the not mattering is really important, right? I think that's the really big part of some of the change we're going through, is this idea that, work from anywhere for me, and certainly work remote or work from home, defines a specific location, and a consistently specific location. And I think one of the things that we're going to see going forward is a combination of locations. It's right. Going to be work from home. It's going to be sometimes work from plane, sometimes work from office. You know what? Sometimes it's going to be work from a shared space, because I just need to be around some people. I don't have an office to go to, in your scenario, but I still want to be hanging out with some people. And maybe I want to have some lunch with a human being, rather than with my cat, for example. And so I absolutely agree. This idea of anywhere or wherever is very different from home or remote specifically, because for me, it allows you to have multiple locations where you can support those interactions.
Right. No, totally agree. And so I'm already going a little bit off topic, because I want to ask you this next question, which is, one of my kind of assumptions, I guess. I wouldn't call it a pet peeve or anything. I don't know why I was about to say pet peeve, but more of an assumption of working, is that for the majority of the last 30 years, 40 years, as there have been people who have been able to use compute while they worked in places outside the office, traveling consultant, a salesperson, whatever the case may be. The tools that most companies applied worked fairly well for those kinds of jobs, right? And so what do you see as kind of the impact of where we might have another 20 or 30% of the company working from anywhere now, or working from wherever, who are in ERP all day long, or are sharing CAD drawings in real time with people? Functions that historically have been in, we're in a perfectly outfitted conference room, and everybody's on the company network, and we have whiteboards that we can share images on and record images from. What do you see as the impact of trying to enable that kind of work for another segment of the employee population?
Yeah, great insight, Mark. In the first instance, I would say that sometimes you still need to be in person, right? Yeah. Sometimes collaboration is, actually, so I use this expression with my team, sometimes collaboration is a contact sport, right? Yeah. You need to be in contact with people to have that rapid back and forth collaborative experience sometimes. But you know what? We over-rotate on the in-person meeting historically. It was always so easy to say, effectively, let's not do any work, let's just go and have a meeting, right? And the meeting turned into where you did the work. I think that one of the big changes becomes you can collaborate over multiple tools. You can use things like cloud computing services to do even some pretty complex stuff in terms of shared workspaces. You think of Google Docs and you think of Microsoft Office 365 just as the productivity suite stuff. Yep. And you can have some really good experiences collaborating in real time on those sorts of tool sets. So that's the starting point is, well, our second point, I guess, is that you need the right tool sets to make that happen. As a collaborative experience. Yes, sometimes you can be in contact, but there are other times when you can just use the right tool sets. And I absolutely believe, and I'm not going to try and promote my business too much today, but I absolutely believe that having video is an important part of that. In my last role, before I was in this role, my team meetings were always video on. My entire team was remote. And so it was always video on. I don't care if you've just been to the gym. Sometimes I would almost deliberately come to a team meeting still wearing my cycling kit, just to let my team know that it's okay to just turn up. We're just a team here. We can all see each other and it's fine. I don't care what you look like. We need to have personal connections. I didn't mandate that for their meetings with other people or my meetings with other people, but for our team on video, we got interaction and collaboration. We got engagement from that. Beyond that, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously VPNs and virtual desktops play a big part, but to your point about ERP, some of this software has to radically change. Consumerization, 10 years ago, I did research on this, showed us that especially when you're talking about attracting and retaining talent, as you were momentarily, we need to have the best possible technology because people have great technology in their home now.
That's right.
So all of this comes together. There's a lot more in terms of people and process as well. You talked about managers, and maybe we can touch at some point on the micromanager and the death of Taylorism, one of my pet topics. But so much of this has to change to accommodate this fundamentally different workflow.
I totally agree. And I mean, I love both the points you just made, but I think it's because it might be subtle for some folks. The point you made about finding another way to break down a barrier for participation is that life does happen. I think that's part of our discussion today is right. Life happens. Historically, we've either hidden or gotten some level of tacit approval for, booking our haircut or our car wash or whatever during the workday and trying to schedule it around other things. But life happens. And the more barriers we remove to people being able to continue to contribute without having to jump through hoops to do it, I think is really vital. And I'd love to get your perspective on it as well. It was historically when people have asked me about communication, I've said communication, I've used two different analogies for it. Either it's the most easily tripped or the most brittle of human interactions is communication. And when I use the term trip, I was like, if you normally walk down a smooth walkway to talk to someone and somebody has taken one of the stones and raised it 3 inches, communication stops. That's how easy it is to break communication that isn't supernatural or super obviously important. And the key, as I think you and I have discussed even in the past, the key to communication extending outside the office place is that so much of the most important conversation doesn't start out as we're about to lose this deal or this product is about to break. It's osmosis education and learning that happens in the hallways, that happens over lunch. And so talk about that a little bit and how, even what you just said applies to that.
Yeah, so this is where the communication is absolutely critical. I think back to my DevOps specializations, communication, collaboration, and integration between teams. That's Dev and Ops. But as you know, I've always believed that DevOps never started with Dev and never ended with Ops. It's throughout the entire company. Continuous marketing, continuous selling, continuous education, continuous learning. Everything needs to be continuous. So you can't have these stop-start. and again, it's about boundary conditions, right? Where is the boundary of your communication stopping and starting? So some of the things that we're looking at, having multiple communication channels, all for the right purpose at the right time. So when do you use email? Typically not for an urgent response, I need this right now. So you might use a chat client, right? A Teams, a Slack, or something like that. So that's we have obviously at Kumu, we have multiple Slack channels always open with my team so they can always communicate and have, and this is something we do, have procedures and processes where you can utilize that in multiple ways. So now we can instantly start a call on Slack. We've got the instant Zooms, right? Oh, I just want to ask you a quick question. Just whip that up on video on Slack, for example. We actually do a lot of asynchronous communication. So this deals with the time zone boundaries. If I need to communicate a quick message to my team in India, I'll get a 12-hour time difference. Do I set up a 30-minute Zoom? Because all Zooms are at least 30 minutes, right? We try to knock them back from 60, but honestly, they could be a lot shorter. You know what they could be? Is a 5-minute download. And so this concept of asynchronous video is something that we're working with quite a lot.
Interesting.
Our CEO every Friday night records an asynchronous video, 5 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, just what happened this week and what we're expecting next week. A quick hit that you can watch whenever you want to, over the weekend, on Monday morning, on Friday night. So a lot of our communication, this is actually coming out of some best practices from Amazon as well. So Jeff Bezos would do the pre-read, right? Here's a document, read this before we come to the meeting. I'm not going to do a presentation for you. I'm going to expect you to know what you're talking about and ask me questions. We do that with video. Just record a quick asynchronous video. Here's the topic we're discussing. I think we should do this, this, this. Come to me with questions at our meeting. Or maybe just send me an asynchronous video whenever you can do that. So these are some of the boundary issues we're trying to solve for, not just wherever, but also whenever.
No, I like that a lot. That's fantastic. I might even take one of those lessons myself. I have a inconsistent habit of sending out updates to the team. And one of my weaknesses that I've asked the team to help me get past is this notion that there's always the next thing. And even though I want the team to celebrate successes, the minute I say that, I go, okay, I need to celebrate this, but I'm worried about this next thing that's going to be even more important, and it's like, and that's a terrible habit. And so the weekly update is something I can definitely get into the habit of and would be a positive, I think. So I appreciate that accidental advice.
When you do it only over 2 or 3 minutes, you have to get your thoughts in order, and you can't drift onto that thing you're worrying about for next week or the next month. And to be fair, that's your job. You're running the business. You should be worried about these big strategic rocks, but celebrating success is so important. And if you do it just in 2 or 3 minutes, you have to just focus on that celebration.
Agreed. Totally agree. So, we've been talking about to a large degree what's happening now and how the current situation is impacting the workplace. I want to talk a little bit about, and this is kind of, a little bit of looking in the future, but not without some decent anecdotal evidence for building those hypotheses. But what do you think of, 2 major lasting impacts of the pandemic and in how companies will continue to improve on the way they engage with employees?
The obvious one is that work from wherever, whenever is the new standard. I really do believe that. We're seeing productivity rates go up for amongst people who are working with the tools and in the locations they want to work in. And, by the way, some of this plays into the performance and the security and the capability at the end point. This idea that you can just tell someone to work from home is not true. This is something I know as a global citizen. You don't just have to worry about connectivity in India or Africa or something. Sometimes you have to worry about connectivity in Idaho or Iowa. It's even in the US, we don't have perfect connectivity and perfect network rates and stuff to be able to do all the collaborations we want to. So to start with, we're going to see an expansion of broadband, no doubt. It continues to happen. But even more now that sort of middle America especially is now experiencing the privilege that some of the coastal people like us, well, I say that as someone who lives in Colorado, I've worked for coastal companies and they're very used to this ideas of remote work and work from home and stuff. And this is coming to everyone, to insurance, to banking, to logistics, to manufacturing, to a bunch of stuff that used to be almost mandatory in person. So definitely technology is going to accelerate. We're already seeing it. The ability to hire anyone anywhere is going to improve. This is hugely important to me personally. I think the opportunity to hire diverse teams and get better talent. I come at this from multiple angles. I think it's the right thing to do, but I also think as a leader for my business, it's the right thing to do. I'm trying to make my business as profitable as I can, so I need the best ideas I can possibly get, which means I want to hire a diverse set of brains who can come and give me more ideas so we can pick the best ones and make those win in the marketplace.
No, and I think that part is so important, and it's important because it actually helps level the playing field both for the future employee and for the company.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, because if you're HP or Amazon or Google, hell, you could afford to have recruiting teams in every major university across the world, right? But for somebody the size of Kumu or somebody the size of Edgevana, I'm lucky to have a recruiting team at all, let alone one that can go to every college that I'm interested in. So the ability to both attract and effectively represent folks from almost anywhere, I think is vital, not only for effective competition, but, well, because you and I both agree on this already, is that diversity in the workplace is so freaking important.
Yeah. And think about the types of people you can attract from literally a work from wherever, whenever. If I have to take time out to take care of my mum who's sick, if I have to take time out to take kids and drop them off at school or pick them up from childcare or something like that, or if I've got a child home sick or I just can't send them to school right now for various reasons, then I can still work for a company that can do work from wherever, whenever. If I'm in a small town USA because I wanted to get out of the big city, I can still work for a company that does work from whenever, wherever, right? If I'm in a minority neighborhood, I can still apply and still do the interview and everything. I don't have to get myself to a physical workplace to go through all that to get that job. You get more candidates, you get opportunities to hire in any city in the world, not just in the US as well, right? I would point out there's privilege issues here as well. Not everyone can work from wherever, whenever. Some people don't have the home life to be able to do that. It's one thing, I think we've talked about this before, Mark, the idea that there is no new normal. I don't like this phrase new normal. It does describe a thing, but we have to be careful of what that thing is. The new normal can't be working from my basement because that's what I have to do now, right? That's not fair. But if we can create, and by the way, in my last company and this company, we've actually sent equipment to people's houses so they can work from wherever, whenever in productive ways. So there's things you can do as a business to overcome some of those issues too.
Right. No, it's funny that you mentioned the new normal because I know it was actually one of our questions to talk about that, and it's I'd like to just get your quick feedback on the idea that the new normal is what, from my perspective, is a broadening of the acceptance and understanding of what normal actually is. Right. I mean, because it's like as kids, he's not normal. Well, what do you mean he's not normal? What? Because he colored his hair? Because he wears different jeans than you do? Why is he not normal? Right? Does he have a different accent than you? And as global citizens and as adults, we have to grow out of those things. At least most of us try to. Not everyone succeeds, unfortunately. But I think that that's kind of the way we have to think about the workplace, right? The new normal is that normal is a very, very wide spectrum.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. I guess my reaction to the new normal is the definite article, the. It's not a new normal. Everyone's new normal is different. I think that's probably the thing. And like you say, we got to get used to everyone's normal being slightly different. I I think the work from home specifically has opened up our home life to other people.
Yep.
And it's now okay if a dog barks, right? It's
Yep.
okay if you have to quickly mute or turn your camera off because all of a sudden someone's walking through the background. Because let's face it, you're working from your living room because maybe the kids are on the dining room table because they're home from school,
Right.
and your partner has the study and you only have one,
Yep.
and they're doing a conference call there. So you have to do it from your living room.
That's right.
And it's okay that your dog has a bark or someone walks past to go to the fridge. It's okay that you're wearing a t-shirt, not a collared shirt one day because you just came back from the gym or something. Not that I did, though. This is my outfit. But, but yeah, that I think it's about normalization of what we previously didn't even see.
Right.
We saw an office, we saw a whiteboard, we saw a screen. That was our normal. I think the new normal is multiple new normals, and it's about normalizing normal human behavior as part of work, not just life.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that and appreciate that as an important point. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about reducing the barriers for participation and comfort. And it shouldn't. And this goes to the next question too. It shouldn't matter to me as the CEO if you do laundry during the day. Only thing that should matter to me is, did you get what you're supposed to be doing done, whatever that is, right? And so I want to take that next question. I know this has been talked about a little bit, but I don't think we can harp on it enough. This idea that I believe many companies unscientifically are making decisions about people having to come back into the office, or are arbitrarily making decisions about what everyone is like, and therefore doing, come into the office because that's where I can see you. Or if I don't have an office for you to come into, then I need to do everything I can to still be able to see you, even if you're at home.
Yep.
And to me, that's such a negative behavior. And I have historically, don't get me wrong, there's not perfect. All of us have our biases, right? All of us make assumptions. All of us create stereotypes on occasion. And so I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I've always believed that the average employee, 80 to 95% of the employees in a company, if given the right resources, want to do the right thing for the company. And so why would you be playing to the 5% that are not?
Yeah.
Should be the opposite, right?
Yeah. And this is systems thinking, right? And again, coming from my background in infrastructure and application development, DevOps specifically, this idea of systems thinking, knowing your role in this complex system. Like, in my enterprise, my complex system involved creating and selling cloud software, essentially. So for any given individual, what is your role in that complex system? Now, if you know what your role is in that complex system, you can probably make good decisions about how to enhance that system and how to get your work done faster so that other people get their work done faster and everyone goes smoothly. And I absolutely agree. When you're talking about middle managers, especially, who need to have that always on, I need your camera to be always on. Or even worse, I'm tracking your interactions with every customer. I'm looking at what you're doing online. I'm getting a snapshot of your screen every 15 minutes or stuff like that. Honestly, I think that's a failure of management.
Agreed.
You don't need to do that if you're managing your team well. Some of the things that Steve, I study innovation quite a lot. And I'm not a huge Steve Jobs fan, but I like some of his lines. One of the things he said was, I don't hire smart people so I can tell them what to do. Right. I hire smart people so they can tell me what to do.
Yep.
This is the thing. If you hire good people, then let them be good at what they're good at.
Right. Exactly.
So the Taylorism, I'm so with you there, mate. I mean, it's not good for productivity to have someone staring over your shoulder all the time.
No.
you have, and I've studied psychology, you have these periods of gestalt problem solving as well, right? Where you have to be not focusing on the problem to solve the problem.
Right.
That's a normal human process in terms of problem solving.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree.
Well, and this is a little bit more psychological as well, but my simple perspective, over and above the obvious, is that if you treat people uniformly as guilty, and then you prove they're guilty when they do something wrong, you're much more likely to find guilty people.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. And people will begin behaving in ways that actually make you think they're guilty, because they're worried you already think they're guilty. And so they're trying to hide things from you. And so to one of my, first of all, I really like the saying from Steve Jobs that you picked. But one of my other favorite sayings that I've probably overused is, you got to be really careful, because you might just get what you asked for.
So true. This is where it comes to, again, I go back to my experience in Agile and DevOps and using metrics that matter. Like, what are you measuring and why does it actually matter? If you're measuring how much time someone is sitting in front of a screen, then they will spend the amount of time sitting in front of the screen that you require them to.
That's right.
There's no implication on how much work they're doing or whether it's good work.
Yep. No, I mean, how many stories did we read in the 80s and 90s about the, what did they call them? The office worker in Japan, the shirt sleeve
salaryman.
The salaryman, yeah. And everybody was like, their whole point in life was leave after the boss left.
Yeah.
Didn't matter if we were actually working, but we had to leave after the boss left, right? And that's just terrible habits.
Have an office where the boss sees you, make sure you're in before them and out after them, and that's your job done.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it goes back to, some of your audience, and you especially, and me, will remember the movie Office Space, and a young Jennifer Aniston wearing the requisite pieces of flair. So working in this fast food restaurant with badges and stuff called flair. And the required number was 17. And so she turned up with 17 pieces of flair. And the manager was like, why don't you have more?
Yeah, exactly.
Because this is the requisite number of pieces of flair.
Yep.
If you measure the right things,
that's right.
And I like to measure outcomes, by the way, because with my team, I trust them and tell me what to do or how to do it, but not both. So I tell my team what I want to get done, and I let them do it. And I'm not going to measure their time in keyboard or stuff like that, right? I'm going to measure what they produced for me. That I'm measuring what matters. There's different metrics there, but it's a fundamental for me, that idea of these metrics that matter.
Yeah, totally agree with that. It's funny, you remind me, and I shouldn't be talking about myself, but you remind me of when I joined Brocade back in 2006. The team, to say had been used and abused was an understatement, right? I mean, they were like the puppy that you can't touch, and it puts its tail between its legs and starts shaking when it sees you. It's like that. The whole group was unfortunately like that. And so in my first meeting with the whole team, I said, look, I'm the new guy. You don't have to earn my trust. I have to earn your trust. Right. And that's how we started the relationship. And I'm a huge believer in you have to give what you're asking for. And if you want people to respect you, then you have to give them respect. If you want people to be loyal, then you have to give them loyalty. And that's just human behavior, right?
Well, it's also good leadership, Mark.
Well,
and you say we're all trying to get better. We are all trying to get better. Every day I would like to be a better version of myself, and I fail every day, but I try again the next day. But no, seriously, Mark, I think you're talking there about a positive form of leadership, which is not as common as we think it could be, and certainly not as common as it should be. But that exact idea of it's a servant leadership, it's coming into a team and knowing that you've got to earn their trust. I'm the same way. I've recently come into a new team. I need to earn their trust. Exactly right. It's a different mode of thinking, though, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. And I don't know for sure that it's the perfect way or not, but it's the way that I believe in. It's the way that I would want to be treated. And so in general, unless somebody tells me that they prefer to be treated differently, which I'm always open to, I make the assumption first that people are going to want to be treated the way I like to be treated. And that's, I like to be recognized. I like to be appreciated. I like to be able to be in my workplace and feel comfortable and not feel like I'm on pins and needles all the time, et cetera, right? So,
and that also reflects good hiring too, by the way, because it's we say these things from a position of privilege where we have great people in our teams who are intelligent and they know their role in the system, and we've worked with them to understand that role, and they make good decisions, and we have some leeway because we're doing it the right way to move quickly and break small things, break them cheaply, fix them quickly. Not every industry, not every employee, not every manager has those privileges, it has to be said. But if you're in a knowledge industry, and I suspect most of the audience on this podcast especially will be, executives and managers in knowledge industries and mostly in technology industries, where we can rely on intelligent, hardworking, motivated people because we hired well, and we can rely on those people. So I don't want to blanket this across the entire world. I think we do have a privilege of working with knowledge workers a lot. But once we do have that privilege, let's give that privilege to as many people as we can by letting them work in the most productive ways for them, and making sure that we're measuring what matters for us, and not as managers putting these, well, I was going to use the wrong word there, these bad measures in place that don't really measure stuff that matter, things that measure process or activity, or even worse, things that measure compliance to policy, when the policy is not really how I get my job done. It's just what stops me from doing the bad things, I guess. Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, as I expected, we went longer than the original half hour, and I would be remiss, probably for both of us, if I don't get at least one question in about edge computing. I mean, it's in the name of my company, right? You're in the scenarios we talked about, especially as you talk about applications that are more synchronous, like working ERP or like working with a group of people in real time. What do you see as the role for Kumu, or the role of companies and technology in helping to support people that are at the edge, right? Like SASE platforms or things like that, in order to give people that experience? Because I think just based on this conversation alone, if not just knowing you for the last 10 years, I think we would both easily agree that a big part of our feeling and being productive, and therefore liking our jobs, is using tools that enable us to be productive.
And I'll tell you I think the big thing about edge, from my perspective, from a video perspective specifically, but also more generically, is the edge has become the office, right? Everything we used to do centrally, we now need to have at least thoughts about, if not actually action to deal with, at the edge. So we start to think about security, we start to think about storage limits, we start to think about compliance. And I use compliance sometimes as a pejorative, but also compliance to things like records retention. So now if I'm working from home, am I retaining records I should or shouldn't? So we need to start working with those sorts of ideas and start to understand that the edge really is the office now. And for Kumu, that manifests in ways like understanding that everyone at the edge is going to be watching these videos at different times on different devices with different bandwidths. So, you can't, I talked about this asynchronous video, record 5 minutes. So this is an edge-friendly way to do it, because rather than working live on a video stream, I can download that video over time and watch it whenever I need to. Doing things like that, but also making sure that we're doing things like transcoding to different formats. So if I'm watching on an iPhone, and this applies to real time as well, by the way, if I watch on an iPhone, it's a different format than if I watch on an Android. If I watch over a high-speed gigabit, it's a different format than if I watch over a 2G LTE network. You can't just store a blob, a binary large object, in a cloud storage. You need to accommodate what is that edge presence like?
Right.
And that then plays into performance as well. What sort of experience is that end user getting? My team member, my partner, and I'll finish with one real example of this. Toyota had to do a product launch of a new vehicle, the Tundra, I think it was, recently. They couldn't bring any of their sellers into the launch event because of the COVID restrictions.
Right.
All of these dealers couldn't actually turn up and look at this car they're meant to sell.
Wow.
So they used asynchronous and synchronous video. They had a launch event and they streamed to all of these edge locations, essentially to the dealers in their dealership, which is essentially an edge location. They streamed the whole launch event and they used like 360-degree video inside the vehicle so you could look around, replicating that office, that in-person experience at an edge location by using better technology.
Right.
So that's where, certainly that's where Kumu is going in, to recognize that edge location is fundamentally the office of the future, and we need to accommodate that with all of our technology.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I, as much as I hate to end, we'll end on this note with just a quick add that, what you're talking about is that in larger sense anyway, that we all need to challenge assumptions for what can be done, where it can be done, right? And so, it's funny. I mean, I'm dating myself now, but we all remember the days of Lotus 123 and Omni Pro and freelance. And I can remember trying to create a document and realizing that I needed to use pieces of all three in order to make one of the document formats look the way I needed it to look, right? And so that's a stupid, tiny little manifestation of what you were just talking about, but it does challenge the assumption of, what technology is available, how that technology can be used, and what value it might be able to bring. So I think that's a great way to end this conversation of people learning to be more adaptive, companies adapting to how people work and where they work and why they do the things that they do. And this has just been amazing, Andy. Thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, Mark, it's a pleasure. Look, Agile is for everyone, not just for coders.
That's right.
And that's the era we're in. Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure as always, mate.
No, same here. And really quickly for the observing audience, where can people find you if they want to see what Andy's up to?
Absolutely. So shameless plug time. Please go to kumu.com, kumu.com. That's my business. So you'll find me on the blog section of that site. The other place you'll find me pretty much every day is at Andi Mann, ANDIMANN on Twitter.
Awesome. And for folks, he is fantastic to conversate with. Always enjoy discussions with Andy, regardless of whether it's over Twitter or over a bottle of wine or anything in between. So I highly urge you to give him a follow and get involved. And again, Andy, thank you very much. And everyone, thank you very much for listening. And if you have someone you believe would be a really interesting guest for us, please feel free to reach out and submit their name and we'll give them a shot. So again, thank you. And until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Edgevana Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast listening app or on YouTube. To learn more, visit www.edgevana.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us on our next episode.